Hi everyone. In this video we're going to model a high-rise building that is based on a CAD model I found on the internet. And if you want to follow along, you can download two project files. One is the file that contains the references for the high-rise building, and we have a top view, a front view and a side view. And the second project file is called lamp start file, and it also has references in the top, front and side views, and I've prepared this file so we can model this lamp detail more easily. You will find the download link for the project files in the video description. I've prepared a zip file that contains both project files, so it's just one download. As usual, we will start with an empty scene that only contains the reference images, and I will show you everything step by step until we end up with the final model. In this case, it's going to look something like this. So this is the final version of the high-rise building that we're going to do in this tutorial, and this is a wireframe render of the building. And as you can see, once we're finished, we're going to have an object that is looking quite complex and which has clean geometry that only consists of quads. So let's get started. We will start the base of the building using a plane object. And I'm going to scale this up to about here and to about here, and I'll use even dimensions and make this 3800 by 1600 units. We need two segments for the width and one for the height. Let's make this editable by hitting C on the keyboard, go to point mode and delete these 2 points here. And next I'm going to use the loop cut tool and add some cuts. And we also need one here. And then we can delete this polygon. I'm also going to select these points here, and I'll make everything even numbers. And here I've moved the slider all the way to -100%. And now I can put this to a width of 200, and I'll make these points 100, these 800, and these should be an even number. These are also 800. Let's reset the axis to 0. I'm going to quick extrude these edges to about here. And now we can also get rid of this polygon here. Let's select all of the polygons, and I'm going to extrude these up. So hit D on the keyboard, and I'm going to move these up maybe 100. And then I'm going to extrude again, and let's do 50. And you can see in the reference image that we also have some beveled edges here. So I'm going to select the edges here on the outside and bevel them. And I'll do an offset of 50 centimeters here. Optimize the object, and let's go ahead and optimize the geometry a little bit. In point mode, I'm going to select these points here and then use the weld tool to weld them to this point. Same here and here, and that means we can select these edges here and dissolve them. And I'm also going to weld these points and then get rid of these edges here by dissolving them as well. And let's select the polygons at the center and delete those, and then optimize the object. Next we're going to do the stairs, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps here. And for the stairs I'm going to start with a plain object again. I'll put this to -x, and we can keep the default settings here. So we have a width and height of 400 by 400 with 20 segments, which means that each of these little squares is 20 by 20 centimeters, which is about the height of a step. I'll make this editable and select 7 polygons here. And then we can select all of these ones. And these ones. And hit UI on the keyboard to invert the selection. I'm going to delete everything else and optimize the object. And let's go to point mode. I'm going to select all of these points here. And I'm going to weld these to this point down here. And then we can select all of these edges and dissolve them. And that will reduce the polygon count quite considerably while keeping quads. And I'm also going to move the object axis all the way to the bottom and all the way over on the z-axis. And let's put this on the floor. And then I'm going to move it and snap it to here. And I'm also going to move this over a little bit. And you can see this yellow line down here. I'm going to move these until I get to this point here and line this up with this edge here in the image. Let's move these over a little bit further. And I'm going to select the points at the back and just snap them to this line here. And right now the steps are still a little bit high. So what I'll do is reset the axis again to the back and the bottom of the object. And I'm going to scale these down a little bit. Let's do 18 centimeters for the steps. And that means we need to reduce the height of each of the steps by 2 centimeters. So that's 7 times 2, which means we need to reduce the height by 14 centimeters. And then we can select all the polygons and extrude them. And I'll move these over and snap them to this edge over here. Select all the polygons, and I'm going to reverse the normals. And that is our stairs side. I'll just delete these tags here, and I'm going to make a copy. We also need some stairs at the center here. So this will be our stairs center. I'm going to reset the axis here and move it to the center and the bottom of the object, and then I'll just move this over to 0 on the x-axis. And let's go ahead and move these forward to about here. I'll select this object here, which is going to be the building, let's call this building base plate. And I'll just move these points back a little bit. Let's move them to about here. And for the stairs at the center, I'm going to ring select the edges and use connect points edges to create an edge loop at the center. And then I'm going to delete all of these points here and select these ones. And I'll just move these over and snap them to this line here. And I'll also move these points over and snap them to this line here. And we don't need any polygons at the bottom. I'm going to select both of the stairs and delete these polygons here, and let's optimize the object, or both objects. And then we can put the building base plate in a symmetry object. I'm going to rename that one to building base, and we can make the stairs children of the base plate. And let's go to the render settings. I'm going to add ambient occlusion. That's already in there. I'll just switch that on. And that is our finished building base. Before I continue with the first floor module, I would like to make a minor adjustment to the stairs. If I switch these to solo mode, or maybe let's drag these out of here and switch off the building base, you can see we have polygons here, but we don't have any polygons over there. And you can either delete these ones. I prefer to keep them because if I do, I can bevel the edges if I want to. So I'm going to ring select these edges and connect them. And then I'll just delete these points here. Use axis center to move the axis. Let's move it also back on the z-axis to here. So now we can use a symmetry object and make this editable. Dissolve these edges and put that back into this hierarchy. And that's it. So this is our building base. I'm going to switch that off for now, or maybe not, because we might need it. And the next thing we're going to do is the first floor. The ground floor is slightly different from the first floor, and we're going to create the ground floor based on the geometry of the first floor. And the reason I'm doing it this way around is because I think the adjustments we need to make are just a little bit easier to make on the first floor than on the ground floor. So we're going to start with the first floor. And like I said, use that as a basis to create the ground floor. And we're going to start the first floor again based on a plane. And I'm going to scale it up to about here. And we need to move this over a bit and then scale it to about here. I'll just do this roughly because I think it'll be easier to make adjustments once we've made this editable. I'll give it 2 width segments and 1 height segment and make it editable. And I'll rename this to wall, first floor and up. And let's delete that tag. Let's go to point mode, and I'll delete half of the object again, and then I'll just adjust the points here. And I'll do maybe 1750 for this. This is not enough. Let's do 1800, which is a bit too much. Let's do 1770, and that's about right. We have to improvise a little bit The previous model that I did is not very accurate. I was basically winging it, and this time I want to be a little more accurate about what I do. So let's move these points to about here, and I'm going to move these points forward to about here. Let's get a little closer so we can adjust these a little bit better. And I'm going to select all the points, and let's see, I'll make this, let's move the axis all the way to here, and I'll do 1150 for the depth of this floor. And I'm going to reset all of these axes here, and then use the loop cut tool and make a couple of cuts like before. And I think we need to make these on these lines here, and we also need a cut here, and then we can delete this polygon, and I'll adjust the dimensions a little bit. I'll make this 330, and I'll make this 750, and this is 690, so let's do maybe 725. I want these to be about the same width, 715, 725, I think that's fine. We also need to snap it to the base, so I'm going to switch the base back on and switch on snapping, and I'll move this to the top of the base. And I'm going to extrude this up 300 centimeters. So each of these floors will be 300 centimeters. And let's check the front view. Okay, and we're a little bit off on the dimensions. I'll select these points here. Let's reset the axis. And I'll scale this down a little bit. And move this over. We also need to move these points over a little bit to about here. And I'll do 350 for the width of this section here. And this one, let's try 700 and see how wide this is. And we'll make this one 700 as well. So that looks okay. And next I'm going to ring select these edges here and use edge cut with 2 subdivisions, and I'm going to scale these edges up to here. So these edges should line up with this ledge here, and the ones at the bottom with the ledge at the bottom. And then I'll just select the top points here and make this 20 on the y-axis. And that wasn't working. I'm going to hit W to switch to the object coordinate system, because we were just in the world coordinate system. And now we should be able to scale these to 20. And I'm going to select the points at the bottom, move the axis down, and make this a height of 20 as well. And now we can select these polygons here. First of all, I'm going to delete the ones at the center, and then select these ones. And I'm going to extrude these. And this is not working because I have the polygons at the top selected as well. I'm going to deselect those, and I'm going to deselect the ones at the bottom as well. And then let's try extruding again. This time it's working. Let's do an offset of 20. And that's looking good. And we can get rid of the polygons at the bottom. I'm going to delete those. And the ones at the top, we can reuse them. Eventually, we're going to need that roof up there, and it has the same shape as the floors. So let's split these polygons off. And by the way, you can do that by right-clicking and selecting Split from the menu. The Cinema 4D default shortcut is UP, and I have a custom one, which is U7. And I'll call this roof and hide it for now. And we can delete these polygons here, and let's optimize the object. And that is our basic first floor. We can get rid of some of the edges here by dissolving them. And then we can ring select these polygons here. And use extrude inner. But before I do, we should move this up because this is the first floor. And we need to move this up plus 300 centimeters to put it there. And I'm going to use extrude inner on these ones, switch off preserve groups. And let's do an offset of maybe, let's try 40. We need to adjust the height and everything else anyway. So I'll just do 40 for now. And that actually looks pretty good. And let's see. I'll just move these bottom edges up a little bit. To about here. And I'll move the ones at the top down a little bit to about here. And let's see. I'll give these an even height and make them 165. So that's fine. And I'll select this polygon here, and let's do a width of 630 maybe. I'll just make them roughly the same size. Over here we can get rid of this polygon, select this edge, and I'm going to move this over to 0 on the x-axis. Select this edge, and I'm going to move this over to about here. And let's see, let's make this an even width as well, or an even number for the width. I just need to make sure that I only select the edges that I really need. So I'm going to select these ones, move the axis over, and let's do 290 for the width. And we've already adjusted this one, and I'm going to scale this one down a little bit to about here and make it 580. And over here these two polygons will become our doors, and I'll make these a width of 110. And let's have a look at this one in the side view. We need to scale this down a little bit to about here, and then make it 990. And that's not exactly like it is in the reference image, but like I said before, I was winging it a little bit on my original model, so it's not very accurate. I think 990 is fine for this one. And over here I'm going to select this one, and well, the size actually is okay. I'm just going to keep it like that, I think. We might line these edges up, so I could select this one, and let's see. Let's copy the position on the x-axis, and I'll just paste it here. And it's still an even number, so I'm going to keep it. So let's continue. And I think what I'll do first is I'll select these polygons here, and I'm going to split these off, and these will be our window frames. And I'll make a copy because we can also use that for the glass. And I'll switch these two off for now. We can delete these polygons. And now let's get those doors in there. And what I'll do here is I'll use the line cut tool. I have visible only switched off. Just be careful not to cut through any of the geometry over there. So I'll just make 2 cuts here and 2 more over here. And I'll select one of these points here, copy the position, and then I'll just select these points down here and put them at the same position. Same over here. And then I'm going to select this point, copy the position, and paste it to these points. And we can weld these points here. Let me undo that. Sometimes it's just easier to use weld instead of the polygon pen, which I just did. And then we can delete these polygons and these ones over here, and I'll select these edges and extrude them down 20 centimeters. And then we can use the polygon pen and close these holes. And then we can extrude the doors. And none of these are going to be separate objects. This building is intended for use in the background, and if you want to, you can set selections in order to be able to add different textures to these areas. I'm not going to do that, and I'll extrude this back maybe, let's do minus 10 centimeters. So we can actually see there's a door in there when we zoom out. If you only use a small offset and zoom out and render it, it's going to be not very noticeable, and I want it to be noticeable, if you know what I mean. So I'm just going to delete these polygons here at the bottom. We don't need these anymore. And then we can again optimize the geometry by welding some points here. So next we're going to do the window frames. I'm going to switch these on, and let's do this in polygon mode. I'm going to select all the polygons and I'm going to scale these a little bit, and I'll make these slightly bigger. So let's add maybe 10 centimeters. And I think we can keep the width of these. And the way I'm going to do these is I'm going to ring select the edges. I'll start with this one. We have to do each of these separately. And I'm going to use edge cut with 5 subdivisions here. And I'm going to scale these edges. Then we can select them and bevel them, and I'll use an offset of 4. And I'm going to select all the polygons and use extrude inner, and for this I'm using an offset of 10, and I do want to preserve the groups this time. And then we can select the polygons here and delete those, and using the loop selection I'm going to select the edges on the outside, and I think we need to switch on boundary loop to be able to select these edges here. And I'm going to extrude these back. Let's do 40 centimeters. And I'm also going to select the edges at the front, and I'll move these forward a little bit, -7. And that will give us something like this. And now we have to do the same thing for the other window areas. So again, I'm going to loop select these edges here, use edge cut, and for this one we can use the same amount or the same number of subdivisions, which is 5. I'm going to scale them up to here, and then select these edges, bevel them. Let's just do this in the perspective view. I'm going to select these polygons, use extrude inner, delete these polygons, select these edges and extrude them back a bit. Again, I'll do -40 centimeters to give it some depth, and we also need to move the edges at the front forward a bit. -7. So let's continue with this one on the side. And for this one we need, I can't really see it, let me undo that and just make this more transparent. So again, edge cut, and I have 7 subdivisions, and it looks like that's exactly what we need. Select these edges, bevel them. Select these polygons and use extrude inner like before. And then we're just going to delete all of these polygons. I'll extrude these back 40 centimeters. And then select the edges over here. and move them over 7 centimeters like this. And for this section here, we only need 2 subdivisions. I'm going to slide these over a little bit and scale these up. Bevel these edges. Use extrude inner on these polygons. Let's see. I'll make this window bar at the center a little bit wider. So I'm going to move this edge over just a little bit. Something like this. Let's get rid of these polygons. Just checking if I did this correctly. And I'll extrude these edges back like before. And move these forward -7. And we need to get rid of this polygon because this is our mirror plane here. Now that leaves the edges or the window section at the back. And for this one, I'll switch to the front view. And it's a bit difficult to see things, and also the reference image that's in there is the one for the front. So I'm going to add the image for the back. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 windows. Then we have a wall section, and then we have another 5 windows. So what I'll do here first is I'll use edge cut with 2 subdivisions, and I'll scale these down to about here. And again, I'll try to do this more accurately than I did it in my previous model. And I'll just select these edges here, and let's give them a size of 170. And we actually can get rid of these edges. And let's ring select these ones and use 5 subdivisions. And I'm going to bevel these edges. And use extrude inner on these polygons. Delete these polygons. And let's extrude these back. And let's move these ones forward +7. Now we have a hole in the walls here. We need to close that. So I'll just switch off the window frames for now. Let's do a ring selection here. And actually I'll just connect these edges. Scale them down. bevel them. 170 divided by 2. I think that was the width that I used for this gap here. And then we just need to adjust the position a little bit. So let's grab these edges here. And I'm going to snap them to here. And I'll snap these edges to here. And I'll delete these edges and then use the polygon pen to create a polygon here. And I'll use edge cut with 2 subdivisions and scale these edges up a little bit. And close these polygon holes. Select one of these edges, copy the position on the y-axis, move this one up, and let's copy the position of this edge and move this one to the same position on the y-axis. And we also need 2 more polygons, one here and one over here. And it looks like I did this completely wrong, so I'll just select these edges and delete them. I'll also delete these ones, because what we need instead is a polygon here and one down there. Another one over here. And one down here, and then we can close that off like so. Yep, that is looking a lot better. So we've got the window frames and the walls, and all we need to finish this is the glass. And for the glass, I'm going to select all the polygons and extrude them with caps, and I'll do just a small offset. We do need a little bit of thickness if we actually want to put a glass material on there and render it, because if you just use a flat polygon, it's not going to work that well for a glass material. Select all the polygons and reverse the normals. And then I'll select these 3, and let's see, select connected, and there's a Cinema 4D shortcut. I have a custom one, so I can select all the connected polygons, and let's switch on the window frames, and I'll just move these back maybe +5. Then select this polygon, select the connected, and let me reset the axis here. And I'll move these back -5. And again select connected and move these ones back -5 as well. The only thing that's still missing on the first floor is the lamps. I'll just drag in my front view reference image. It's these small objects here, and that's the only other detail we need for the floors before we can copy everything and create the ground floor. And I'm going to use a new symmetry object for this. And let's put the window frames and the glass as children of this first floor. And there we go, that's our mostly finished first floor module. I have prepared another project file for you that we can use to model the lamp, and you can see here that I've put reference images in the top, front and right views. And this object, like most of the other objects, is simple enough, and the reason for that is we don't need a lot of detail, we just need a hint at what the object is supposed to be. It's a little bit like putting greebles on a spaceship. We don't really need a lot of detail because that building is not intended for close-ups, it's just supposed to look good at a distance. I'll start this in the front view by adding a cube, and I'm going to scale this up a little bit, and let's go ahead and increase the transparency here. And I'm going to move this forward a little bit and scale it down, and I'll just do this roughly. We can always adjust everything once we've made this editable. I'm also going to increase the transparency here. So let's make this editable. And I'll just move some points around to fit the shape of the object. And I'll scale this up a little bit. And let's have a look at the side view. I'm going to scale these points down a little bit. And let's use even numbers again. I'll do 340 on the x-axis, 430 on the y-axis, and 185 for the z-axis. And now we can ring select these edges here and use edge cut. I'll do 2 subdivisions, and I'll scale these edges down and slide them over to about here. And I'll make these 32 centimeters. And I've just added 2 new edges using edge cut, and I'm also going to scale these to 32 and move them down to here. And let's add an edge loop here. And then we can select these points and scale them down. I'm also going to decrease the Phong angle to get rid of the weird shading here. And now we can select these polygon loops here and extrude them out a little bit, something like this. And I'm going to select the polygons at the back, and I'll extrude these back to about here, and then just scale them down on the x-axis to about here, and extrude them out to about here. And that's already the finished object. We can put the object axis all the way over on the z-axis. And maybe let's move it up to here. And I'll just use snapping to snap the axis to the midpoint on this edge here. And you need to switch that on in the snap settings. It's midpoint snap. So this is our lamp. I'll just delete the tag, save the file and copy the object, and I'll paste it to my scene here. And I'll move it over to here and rotate it 90 degrees or minus 90 degrees. And I'm going to snap it to this wall here. And we need to scale this down quite a bit. Let's take a look at the reference image. This needs to be a lot smaller. Something like this. And we need to snap it to here. And the position looks about right. And with the lamp selected, I'm going to create an instance, and I'll make this a render instance. And one important thing to note about render instances is that if you want to make this object editable, you need to switch off render instance first. I'm going to do that in the final chapter of this tutorial, where I'm going to convert everything into geometry. But for now, we're going to keep the instances, and we'll keep everything parametric for now. Now what I want to do for the lamp as well, and I should have done that before, is I want to reset the axis to 0. I'll just delete that and create another instance. And I'll rotate this around 180 degrees and move it over to the other side. And we need to snap it to this wall here. And let's put this as a child of the first floor wall, or the symmetry object here. And it looks like I forgot to delete some polygons on the wall. Let's just switch off the symmetry, go to polygon mode, and I'll get rid of this polygon here as well as of this one down there. Same over here. Let's just delete these two polygons and optimize the object. And I'll do a final check here. We've got all quads on this one. It's all quads here. And the window frames also consist of quads only, and the class is all quads as well. Now we've got all the details that we need for the first floor, and we can make a copy of this and call it ground floor. Rename this to wall, ground floor, and we can leave everything else as it is. I should have made the lamp instance a child of the symmetry objects here as well. So now we can go ahead and make our modifications to the ground floor. Before we do anything else, let's move this ground floor to 150 on the y-axis, so it sits on the building base here. And you'll notice that we have a gap just below the door on the first floor. We're going to cover this up with the balconies that we're going to create later. I'll switch off the first floor for now, and let's have a look at the ground floor. I'll just switch that off for a second. So what I'll do for the ground floor is I'm going to put in an entrance here, and I would also like to make a couple of more changes that to me make sense. For example, we have these big stairs on the left and on the right. It would make sense to have entrances over here and over here as well. And what I'll do is I'll put another double door in here, and I'm going to turn these doors, this one and this one, into windows. And we'll also have windows to the right and to the left of the door that we're going to put in there. For now, I'm going to drag this out of the symmetry object, and I'll remove the children. And let's go to polygon mode. I'm going to select the connected polygons on this part of the object, and I'll just delete them and optimize the object. And for the window frames, we're going to do the same. Select the connected polygons, delete them, and optimize the object. I'm going to keep the lamps for now, and as far as the ground floor itself is concerned, I'm going to use the polygon pen and close this gap here. And I'll delete these polygons here. Select this polygon and use UY on the keyboard to grow the selection. I'll just delete these polygons, and I'll do the same thing over here. Let's optimize the object, and I'll select these edges and use connect points edges, which will create a point here, and we can connect the geometry like this, and then we can close these gaps by creating polygons in between these edges like so. And we need to do the same thing over here. So I'll just select these edges, connect them, connect these points, and using the polygon pen tool, I'm going to create the geometry to close these holes here. And I'll copy the position of this edge here, and I'm going to move these edges to the same position on the y-axis. And we can dissolve these edges here. And over here. And let's select these edges, and I'll I'll change the size to 200 maybe on the z-axis. Next I'm going to create the geometry for the door. So with these edges selected, I'm going to run the connect points edges command, and then we can select these edges and bevel them. And each of these doors will have a width of 110 centimeters, like the doors we did for the first floor. And there's going to be a separator in between them. So I'll use an offset of 120. Let's try 120. 110 is the door, but we need the separator in between. And let's just see how that looks. And then I'm going to select these edges and bevel them with no subdivisions and an offset of 10. So the doors are each 110 units wide, and we have the separator in between, which is 20 centimeters. And next I'm going to select these edges down here and remove them. You can just delete these, and let's select these ones and extrude them down 20 centimeters. And let's create a polygon here and another one over there. And I'll also select these edges and connect them, and we need to scale these down. Going to select all of these edges and then move them over. I'll leave a little bit of room between the door and the windows, because we could put a lamp to the right and to the left of these doors. And let's see, we could give these an even width. Let's do 140. I'll just move the x-axis over here, and I'll change the width of this window to 140. And let's go ahead and optimize the geometry. We can weld these points and these ones down here. We do need to be careful though, because let's see, I'll just extrude these polygons back -10 without caps. And I'll delete these polygons down there. And we can get rid of the edges down here. Let's just try that again. So we can dissolve these edges, and we can also dissolve these ones down here. And we can also weld the points down here. So now we can dissolve these edges. However, up here we do need this edge here. So I think I'll just put that, or put these edges back in there. And let's get rid of these ones again. And I'll just make sure that the new edges that we just created are at the same position as the edge of the window here. And I'll do the same over here. Okay. So maybe we could try and weld these points here and these ones. And then we can get rid of these edges and these ones. But it does leave a triangle in there. And that is not really what I want. I think the best way is just to keep the geometry as it is here. So we've got the geometry for the windows and for the doors on this part of the object. Now let's go ahead and add the door over here at the center. First of all, I'll select the connected polygons on the glass object, delete these, optimize. And for the window frame, I'll do the same thing. Let's just recreate this from scratch. And then I'll just close this polygon hole. And actually, let's stay in the perspective view. I'll just ring select these edges here and connect them. Select the edges and scale them down. And I'll select this edge over here as well. Move the x-axis over. And the door will be 110 units like the doors over here. And we need that separator. So I'll make this 120 units wide. Let's connect these edges. And I'm going to select these edges and this one. And we'll make this 10 units. So that makes this door 110. And we have the separator in between. Let's go ahead and delete these edges. We can also get rid of these ones. Just delete these two. Extrude these down 20 centimeters. And let's create a polygon here. And I'll extrude these polygons back 10 centimeters. And as for that window, I will create additional edges like this and move these over to about here. And I'll make this 115. And I'll leave a bit of room again between the window and the door because I'm going to put another lamp there. So I think that's looking good. Now what I'll do next is I'll select these polygons, and this is pretty much the same what we did for the first floor. We're going to split these off, and these will be our window frames. I just renamed this to ground floor for now. We're going to combine these with these window frames later. And let's make another copy and call this glass ground floor. And I'll hide this one and this one. And let's delete these polygons here. And as for the window frames, I'll select all of these and I'll change the size to 175, which is what we did for the other window frames. And I think we don't need to change the width, although we could. We could have done this for the window frames on the rest of the object as well. That's just so that the window frame sits on the geometry of the wall. And I didn't do that for these window frames. These are flush with the opening. Shouldn't be a problem, but could be a problem when you render with GI, because we don't have any geometry going inside on this wall, and sometimes that causes issues when you render with global illumination. So I think I'll just make each of these 10 centimeters wider than they are right now. So let's change this to 150. Oh. First of all, reset the axis and then change this to 150. And we'll make this 210. And this one 125. And I think I'll turn each of these into double windows. So I'm going to select these edges, connect them, and then select the edges and bevel them with an offset of 4. So we're getting the same width for the window bars that we have for the other window frames here. And let's select all of the polygons and use extrude inner with an offset of 10. Then we can select these polygons and remove them. And now we need to select the edges and extrude them back, like we did for the other window frames. And this time I'm going to try and do an outline selection. Because that's just less of a pain. Loop selection using boundary loops, you may have noticed this in the previous video, is a bit tricky. And it looks like I forgot to delete these polygons here. So let's go back to edge mode and I'll just do another outline selection. And I'm going to extrude these edges back -40, and let's use an angle of 90 degrees, and that should give us this. And then we need to select these edges. And move these forward. -7. And I'll move these ones over -7 on the x-axis. Let's try and do this in world mode. I just tried to move these on the z-axis, which doesn't make any sense. So we don't need to switch to world mode. Let's just move these over on the x-axis, -7. And let's select these ones and move these over +7. Okay, so that's looking good. And just select these window frames. And let's see, I'll do this in the top view maybe. And I'll select these points. And I'll just move them over -5. And move these over +5. I feel more comfortable making this adjustment so that the frame intersects the geometry of the wall. So I'll move all of these over five centimeters. Okay, and before I do anything else on the ground floor, I'll switch everything off. And let's make the first floor. Actually, I'm just going to make the window frames visible. And let's go ahead and move these points over as well. Not sure about these points. No, we don't need to move these. Let's switch off the symmetry object for a second. And we don't need to move these points. These are at the mirror plane. There's no need to move those around. Okay. So I'm going to switch that object off again. And let's make the rest visible. And we're almost finished on the ground floor here. What we still need to do is create the glass. And I'm going to select all the polygons and extrude them back. Minus, what did we do for the other windows? Let's just switch these on. 3, okay. So I'll extrude these polygons back -3 and I'll create caps. And let's select all of them and reverse the normals. And then I'm going to select the connected polygons and move these back. And I think we did -5. Let's undo that. We need to move them +5. Select these polygons and I'll move them over +5, and these ones -5. So let's switch everything else back on and see how it looks. And I think that's looking good. Let's go ahead and use connect objects and delete to combine the glass objects. I'll call this glass ground floor. And we also need to connect the window frames. And I'll do a quick check to see if everything is quads. And I'll just select everything and optimize. And we're almost done now. The only thing I still want to do is add a few lamps. And we already got the lamps here. So this is our actual geometry. I'll just rotate this around 90 degrees and change the object axis back to 0. Let's move this over, and I think we need to snap it to here. Not quite. We need to move this back a little bit further to here. I'll just move this over a little bit, and it looks like the Phong angle could be a little bit lower on this one. Let's make sure to change that on the first floor as well. I'll delete this lamp instance and create a new one based on the one we've just put here. And let's call this lamp ground floor. And I'll move the copy over. You know what? I'll just use snapping and snap this lamp to this edge here, and I'll move it around to snap it to the midpoint, and then I'll move it back down again to about here. And let's do the same with, no, actually, I'll just create a new instance, which is a bit faster. And let's put this here, and then just move it over. to here, and I can't snap it to the midpoint on this polygon. Well, I should be able to do that. Let's just undo that. I think I don't have polygon snap activated, but if I switch that on, I should actually be able. No, I'm not, because it wants to snap to the center of this polygon. Might as well switch that back off again. Let's just eyeball this, because we have that frame in between here. So let's snap this to the midpoint, select the lamp, copy the Y position, and just paste it to the instance. And we need another instance over here, so I'm going to make a copy and move it over. And let's move this forward. I think we need to snap it to this edge here. And again, I'll use midpoint snap to snap it to here, and then I'll just paste the Y position. So now let's go ahead and put everything back into the symmetry object. I'll start with, where is it? The wall, ground floor, and put that in there, and everything else will be a child of the ground floor wall. And I think that's looking pretty good already. So we can now move on and create the first balcony. Let's start with a small balcony. I'm going to switch off the building base and the ground floor. And I'm going to copy the wall of the first floor. Delete all the children, and I'll just move it down. And this will be our balcony small base. And on this object, I'm going to select the polygons here. Actually, we don't need the ones at the front, so let's just deselect those. And then I'm going to invert the selection by hitting UI on the keyboard, and we can delete everything and optimize the object. And then I'll create some polygons here, one over here and one over here. Just need to find a better angle to do that. And then I'll just select these polygons here and delete them. And I'll also get rid of these ones. And let's optimize this again. I'll switch on the first floor again. So we've made this flush with the doors and the bottom of this area here. Let's delete this edge And let's see, I'll just select these edges here, and these have a depth of 290. I'm going to change that to maybe 270. Let's undo that, deselect these edges here. I just want to scale the edge at the back and the one at the front. So 270. And I'm going to select all the polygons and extrude these down -5 with caps. Select all the polygons, and I'm going to reverse the normals on these ones. So that is our balcony base. We also need, let's have a look at this in the front view. We also need a base for the railing and a top for the railing, which is going to be the handrail, and we need the balusters. And what I'll do to create these is I'll select this polygon and I'm going to split it off. And this is going to be our balcony small railing bottom. And I'll center the axis on this, which for some reason isn't working. Or is it? No, it's not. Oh, we need to go to model mode, sorry. And now it is working. So let's close that again, and I'll make this a depth of 10. And let's move it to about here. And I'm going to extrude this polygon up 10 centimeters. Again, with caps. Actually, I'm just going to do 5. Let's check the reference image. It's probably a bit difficult to see. It looks about right. And I'll make a copy of this. And the balcony railing will have a height of 130 centimeters, and we'll have 10 for the railing base and 10 for the handrail, so the balusters will have a height of 110. I'll rename this to handrail, go to model mode, and I'm going to move this up plus 120, I think. And we need to make this a little bit wider. I'll just select these points here and snap them to the wall. Same over here. And I'll make another copy of the bottom railing. And this will be the baluster. And I'll change this to 5 by 5 and a height of, well, 5 on the x-axis, and on the y-axis we'll do 110, and we need to move this up plus 5 centimeters. And it looks like I need to move the handrail down. So let's move this to 560 on the y-axis. And we need to clone this baluster. First of all, I'm going to move it over to about here. And the balcony that you see here actually is the big one. But as far as the balusters are concerned, I did fewer balusters for the small balconies, but I think this will look better when we create the same amount of balusters that we have for the big balcony. So I'll just move this over to about here, line it up with the reference image, and then I'll use a cloner. And I'll create render instances for this one. And we need to clone it along the x-axis. Let's adjust the spacing to 35, and we need a couple more copies. And 33 looks about right here. And I'm going to change the color. But before I do that, I'll select the handrail, and we need to move this up a little bit, I think 5 centimeters. And now it should sit on top of those balusters. In order to change the color, I'm going to switch the display to constant shading lines, which gives us an evenly lit scene. And then we can use the color picker and just click on any one of the other objects, and that will make the balusters the same color. And I'm going to switch that back to raw shading with lines. And for the balcony base, I need to reset the axis or move it to the center of the base, and I'm going to move it all the way to the bottom. And now we can make everything else a child of the base. So that is the small balcony. And because the small balcony only starts on the 3rd floor, on the bottom 2 floors, maybe it's a little bit easier to see in the side view, we have the big balconies, and these go up 1st floor, 2nd floor, so we need to move our small balcony to the 3rd floor. So I'll add 600 to the position, and that will move it to where it should be. And there's one more thing I want to do before I move on to the big balcony. Let's go ahead and select each of these objects. I just want to make sure that we have the polygon normals facing the right direction, and it seems that we do. And I'm also going to delete the top and bottom polygons on the baluster, and that will save quite a few polygons once we start copying this around, because we're going to have a lot of these objects here. For the big balcony, we'll do the same thing that we did for the small balcony, and because I forgot to make a copy of the original polygons I created, we'll just have to do everything again. So what I'll do is I'll make a copy of this wall object, delete the children, and then again select the polygons here at the bottom, This time we also need the one at the front. And let's hide that small balcony. And I'm going to invert the selection and delete the polygons. I'm also going to hide these walls here. And like before, I'm going to create polygons again, like this. We'll start with the areas where the doors are. And then we can create a polygon in between here. And here. And I'm going to select these edges and extrude them forward a bit. And I'm going to ring select these polygons and delete them and optimize this object. And let's move the axis to the center and the back of the object. Now this is not really working right now because this polygon here and this one have different lengths, so the center is about here. I'll just switch on the object axis, which is this button over here, switch on snapping, and I'll move this axis manually and snap it to the midpoint on this edge here, so we have it centered. Let's go back to edge mode. We still have the edges at the front selected. And I'll switch to the top view, and we need to move these edges to about here. And I'll move this one over. And I'll make this a length of 245. Let's select these two edges and make this 245 as well. And the position seems about right. I'm going to select all the polygons and extrude these down, again using caps. And we'll make this a little bit bigger, and we need to extrude it down. Select all the polygons, and let's reverse the normals here. And next we're going to create the railing. Let's rename this to balcony big base, and maybe I'll put a dash in between there, and I'll just do the same for all of these objects here. And while we're at it, we could also mirror this small balcony over to the other side. And what I'll do to mirror it is I'll create a symmetry object I'll just add a new one to the scene without holding down the Alt key, and I'll make it a child of the balcony base, and then I'm going to use character commands, reset PSR, and this will move the symmetry object to the center of the base. And let's drag this out again. I'll just move the object axis back to here. And then let's do this again. I'm using reset PSR. I have a shortcut for that to put the symmetry object where the object axis of the balcony base is. And then I'm just going to move that symmetry object over to 0. Rename this to balcony small. And let's just make this a child. And this will mirror everything over to the other side. Now, in order to create the railing for this big balcony, I'm going to select the edges here. And then use mesh commands edge to spline. And this will turn this edge selection into a spline. And this is going to be our path. And what I'll do with this is I'll go to point mode. And I'm just selecting all the points so you can see what I'm doing. And what I'll do is I'll right click and create an outline, and I think we need to go negative here, and let's do maybe -10. And I want to create a new object, so I'll just undo that, hit apply again, and this will create this new object here. I'll just delete the original spline, and I'll center the object axis. And then I'm going to put this in a sweep object. And this is the railing bottom. And holding down Shift, I'm going to add a rectangle spline to this. And this is pretty big. We're going to make this the same dimensions as the bottom of the small balcony. So we need a width of 10 and a height of 5. And that will give us this. And I'll rename the rectangle to profile, and then I'll create an instance of this, and we need to move this up plus, let's do 110 for now. And once we've added the balusters, we can adjust the position of this railing top. And we can reduce the polygon count a little bit for that railing by selecting the path, and I'm going to select all the points. Well, you can't really see it, so I'm going to switch that off. We can actually delete these 2 points here, we don't really need those. And let's switch that sweep object back on. And now we don't have these additional polygons here and over here. And for the baluster, we can reuse the one we created for the small balcony. So I'll just drag out a copy, and I'll make it a child of that sweep object, and then use reset position scale rotation to put it at the center of this sweep object. Let's drag it out. And now we need to clone this baluster along the railing. And in order to do that, I'm going to make a copy of that path spline and call it baluster path. And I'll take the small baluster and put this in a cloner object. And this is actually balcony big. And I'm going to set this cloner to object mode. And the object is the baluster path spline. And we'll set the distribution to vertex because everything else I've tried wasn't really that good. Now we don't really have enough balusters here. So what I'll do to get the amount of balusters or the number of balusters that I need is, let me just switch everything off except for the spline and the balusters. What I'll do to get more balusters is I'll select these points on the sides and I'm going to subdivide and subdivide again. And that gives us 3 balusters here, which is good. And then I'm going to select the 2 points at the front. We can also get rid of these ones, by the way. Let's just undo that. Not sure why deleting this point created more balusters here, but never mind. Now we've got the right amount here. So I've just selected the points here at the front, and I'm also going to subdivide. Let's just undock this. I'm going to subdivide these points, and you can see the more we subdivide, the more points we get. And I think that this is about the amount that we need. So that is looking pretty good, I think. Switch on the railings and let's have a look at the position of the top railing, and it seems to be exactly where it should be. I'll switch the display to constant shading lines again, select this cloner. I'm going to switch the balusters to render instances, go to the transform tab and use the color picker and click on the railing. Did I switch the display? Constant shading lines, yes I did, because they do seem to have a different color. That's funny, usually that trick works. Let's just switch on the balcony base and I'll just try that again. And that's better. I'm going to switch that back to good old shading lines, and there we go. That is most of the big balcony done. We also have these big pillars here that support these balconies, and for these I'm going to just start with a cube and I'll move that into position over here, scale it down a bit, scale it down a bit more, this will be the big balcony pillar. And I'll do 28 by 28 for the width and the depth, and I'll make this editable and move the axis to the bottom. And I'm going to snap it to the building base. And let's go to point mode, and I'll just move these points up to about here. We're going to snap these later to the second balcony. Right now we only have one of these, and I think we have too many balusters. I'll just make a copy of the big baluster of the pillar, and I'll just undo a couple of steps because I need to go back and change the amount of pillars so that is the right amount. And we can paste the pillar back in there, and let's switch the rest of the objects back on. And I'll just change the color again. So that's more like it. We need to move this pillar forward a little bit to about here. And let's check the position here. And this looks about right. I'll just move this over to 0. No, actually not over to 0. I'll move it over and snap it to the center of the balcony base. So I'll move this over to here, switch on snapping. I'm just going to use axis extension. And snap to the midpoint of this edge here. And what we can do now is put this in a symmetry object. I'll rename this. And then we can just move this pillar over. Let's move it to about here. And we also have a base for this pillar. I'm going to make a loop cut down here, select these edges, and I'm going to scale these, and let's try 10 centimeters. We can always adjust that if we want to. And I'll select these polygons here and extrude them. Switch off caps before you do, and I'll extrude this out. Let's do 15. Let's switch on that building base. I just want to make sure it actually sits on that base, and it does. I'm going to put all of the other balcony objects into a null object by hitting Alt-G. And this is our balcony big. And I'll create an instance of this and make it a render instance. And we need to move this up 300 units. And now we can select the pillar, go to point mode, select the points at the top, and oh, I can't snap them to the instance. Well, okay, I'll just eyeball it. And let's go ahead and create a symmetry object. And I'll make it a child of the balcony big base and reset position, scale and rotation, and then drag it out and move it to 0. And these are the balconies big, and I'll just drag the balconies in there, including the instance. Oh, that's not really working. So what we'll do is we'll just create another null object. Call this balconies big, and I will put the instance in there and the big balcony and the pillar. And let's put this in the symmetry object. And I'm wondering if I switch that to instance, okay, then it's working, which means that we also need to switch the cloner for, not the sweep object, but the cloner to simple instances, and something's still not working. I'm not sure what. We could try and also put the spline in there, which doesn't do anything. And I'm really not sure why we're not getting all of the objects. So the question is, how can we solve that? And I think what I'll do is I'll just delete the instance, not this one. Is that even in there? Yeah, for some reason that's not working. So I could mirror these objects over. Balcony big. So what I'll do is I'll create an instance of the symmetry object. And this is working. And we need to move this one up plus 300. And I'll switch everything else back on. And this is looking good. Now we need to copy the wall of the first floor, and for that we will also use a cloner. So let's put this in a cloner object. And we need to clone this with a distance of 300. And I'm just checking whether everything is where it should be. And things look about right. I think we could change the height of the base for the big balcony a little bit. So let's select the balcony big, and where is it? It's the base here. And I'll just select the points at the bottom. And I'm going to move these up. Let's try +3. And that is looking better, I think. And we need a lot more copies of the wall here. I'll also switch these to render instances. So let's bring this up to 14. And I'll switch the display to constant shading with lines, select this cloner, go to the transform tab, and I'll pick the color of the base to turn everything to the same color. And you can see we're getting something that is looking pretty nice and detailed. And everything's finished now. Oh, except for the balconies. We also need to copy these ones. So I'm going to put the small balcony in another cloner. And we'll set the distance to 300 on the y-axis again. And let's add $12 copies. Oh, and that's interesting. We're not getting any balusters here. So let's go back a step, see what's going on. I'll just drag this out of the symmetry object, and there we go, we have all of our objects back. Let's just check the cloner. Let's try and switch off the render instances and see if that does anything. So let's put this back into the balcony small, and that seems to have done the trick this time. So let's again try and put this in a cloner. Change the distance to 300. Oh, and this time it seems like we're not getting any of the other objects. That's funny. So I'll just go back a few steps. I wonder why that is. We're not getting any of the objects over here. So switching off the render instances didn't do anything. We could try and switch off fixed clones, which doesn't do anything either. So we might as well switch both of these back on. Render instances does seem to have an effect on this. And I think I just found the problem. We have the balcony small base, and that's not in the symmetry object. And if I put that in there, we get the base, but we're losing the balusters, which is really interesting. I have no idea why that happens. I'll just drag these out of here and put them into a null object. And that is our balcony small. And let's try if this works if we add the null object to that symmetry object. And it does work. So now let's try and put this into a cloner. And this time we're getting all of the objects, which is nice. And we need a couple more copies, so we need 12 clones here. And I'll change the color of these clones. Actually, it's balconies, small. And there we go. Okay, so that's looking cool. And that's most of the building finished. We just need to add the roof and the details on the roof. In order to create the base of the roof, we can use the object that we copied earlier in this tutorial and rename to roof. So now's the time to actually use that. I'm going to move this up, and we need to move the object axis of this object. I'll just do this manually by switching on enable axis, and then I'm going to snap the object axis to this point here, switch off the axis again, and let's snap it to the top floor. And that's not working, and the reason it's not working is because the cloner for the floors is set to use render instances. If I switch that off, I can snap this roof object to the top floor. I just switch render instances back on here. And for now, I'm going to switch everything off so we can focus on this roof here. And we could clean up the geometry a little bit, and I'll do that by selecting all the polygons and just melting them. And then we need to get rid of some of the points here. And it looks like we also have an additional point here that we don't need. And there's one more here. And then I wanted to connect these points, but I think it's better to wait until we've created the bevel on this roof. So what I'll do next is I'll just extrude this n-gon here. And I'm going to create caps because I want to keep the bottom of the object. And I'll extrude this up 20 centimeters, which is what we used for the ledges of the floors. And then I'm going to extrude again, and this time I'm going to switch off caps, and I'll just quick extrude this up maybe 30 centimeters, looks about right. And I'll delete the polygons at the center. And then I'm going to select the edges using the loop selection tool, and we can select these edges here. And I'm going to bevel these with no subdivisions, and I'm going to use the same offset that I used to extrude the top part, which is 30 centimeters. And we could switch on limit just to be safe. I'm going to deselect everything and optimize. And then we need to fix the n-gons here. And over here we could just connect these points to get a quad here. And I'll do the same thing here at the bottom. And as far as this area here is concerned, I'll just make a cut, and I have visible only switched off. I think I had better switch that on. And I'll make a cut here, and then I'll switch visible only off, and I'll make a cut here for that bottom edge. And we probably need to we definitely need to make some more changes here. For one thing, we can get rid of these edges here by dissolving them, and we still have an n-gon down here. And I'll just make a cut over to here, and then I'll select this point, copy the Z position and paste it to here. And we need to do the same thing up here. I'll just make a cut, copy the Z position and paste it to this point. And we still have an n-gon. I'll try and optimize, which doesn't help to get rid of it. So I'll just try and find it. And it's the polygon here at the back, and the reason we have this n-gon is because these 2 points are not connected. We could actually optimize this by welding these points and getting rid of this edge, which will give us a quad here, and down here I'll just weld these points. That didn't work so well. I'll just select these points and then use the weld tool to weld them, and then we can get rid of this edge down here and dissolve these two edges. And now we should have all quads here. So we can put this in a symmetry object and rename this to roof. And I think the next thing we'll do is this detail up here, which I'm going to call roof access. And then we're going to deal with the railing, which will be the last detail for this building. But for now, we'll start with the roof access. And I just switch off the roof for now. We could use a cube or a plane. I'm going to start with a plane and move it to about here. And I'll scale it up to about here. So this will be our roof access. And we only need one segment for the width and for the height. Let's make this editable. And I'll move it up and snap it to the roof. And we need to change the position of the points here to line these up properly. With what we have in the reference image. And once we've done that, we can select all of the points, and I'll just use even numbers again. So let's do 2000 by 565. Yeah, I think that is about right. I just wanted to move this over a little bit further, but we have these bars here and these are sitting on the side walls, so I think we're good. So now let's go ahead and extrude this polygon up. I'll just use quick extrude here and I'll move this up 270 units, and I'm going to extrude again using 50 units. Then I'm going to scale this down a little bit. Let's do this in the front view actually. So I'll scale it to about here maybe. And I'm also going to scale this a little bit on the z-axis. And that looks about right. Let's reduce the phone angle to 33 and see what that looks like. And 33 is low enough, I think. I'll just delete this tag here. Okay, so that is the basic shape of the roof access. And we also have these bars, and we have a couple of doors in there, and the extrusions on the top. And I'll start by adding the bars. And what I'll do to add these is, well, let's start by creating the bars first, and then we'll figure out how to copy them along this roof axis. Let's go to polygon mode. I'll just select this polygon and split it off. And this is going to be the roof axis bar. And I'll center the object axis on this one and move it down all the way to the bottom. And I will scale this down to, let's try 8 units on the x-axis. Yeah, maybe let's make this 10. And I'll select the polygon and just extrude it out a little bit. Let's do maybe, I'll try another 10 centimeters here. And we don't need to create caps. We don't need a polygon at the back. And we don't need one at the bottom either. Let's just have a look how this looks when we render it. And it looks about right, I think. I'll just get rid of the polygon at the bottom. And I'll add a loop cut somewhere up here. And you can't really see it in the reference image, but the top is slanted. You can see it a little bit over here. So it goes straight up and then it goes over a little bit. So I'll move these edges down a little bit to about here. And then we can select this edge and just move it over like so. And I'll do a quick render to see if the Phong shading's off, but it looks alright. We could bring this down to 22, but I don't see anything change, so we might as well keep it at 33. Okay, so far so good. Now the question is, how do we copy this along this building here? And we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 of these bars. And we have 4 over here. And one thing that didn't work very well for me is trying to clone this along a spline. We could actually split a spline off this geometry and use that, but there's a lot of trial and error involved. So the method I used was a little bit different. And what I'll do is I'll close this polygon hole at the bottom, and I'll select this polygon and split it off. And I'm going to delete this polygon again from the roof axis. And let's call this bar, I'll call it template. We're not going to keep this object. And I'll switch off the roof axis for a second. And what I did to get the distribution that I wanted was I selected these edges and then used edge cut. And since we have 14 on this side, I'm going to use 14 subdivisions. And we have 4 of these bars on this side, so I'm going to use edge cut and use 4 subdivisions. And like this, we get a nice and even distribution, and that is something that is a bit difficult to achieve with splines. I mean, I could set the spline to uniform, but no matter what I tried, it was always something that was trial and error. And the method I'm using is much more predictable, I think. Maybe I'm missing something. So what I'll do next is I'll loop select, I'll do a boundary loop selection here, and then I'm going to use mesh commands edge to spline. So that is the bar template spline. We can get rid of this one. And now I can put the bar in a cloner. And I'll rename this, and we'll clone to an object, and the object is our template spline, and we'll change the distribution to vertex. And that's not too bad, but our bars are facing down and the wrong direction. And what we can do to fix that is go to the transform tab. And let's just see. I will rotate these minus 90 degrees here. Oh, and I did it the wrong way. We need to move these up or rotate them around 180 degrees, and we can rotate these to 90 degrees. And there's only one problem. We also have these bars on the corners, and I don't want them there. But this is something we can easily fix. With the cloner selected, we can use the MoGraph selection. And now I can select the bars on the corners. And you can see we've created a MoGraph selection tag. And then what I'll do is I'll use a plane effector with the cloner selected. And you can see the plane effector automatically uses the MoGraph selection and moves these clones up 100 units. I don't want to change the position of these clones though, I want to change the scale. And I'll switch that to uniform and set this to -1. And this means the clones on the corners will simply disappear. And I'm renaming this effector so we know what it does and which object it is meant for, because we're going to do something similar later again with the roof railing. So let's switch off the let's switch on the roof again, and also the roof axis. And I'm going to change the color of these clones. And I'll switch the display to constant shading lines. And on the transform tab of the cloner, I'll use the color picker and click on the roof axis, and that will turn the bars to the same default gray as the roof axis. Okay, let's switch that back to good old shading with lines. And we also have a couple of doors in there. Can't see this in the top view, but in the side view. So I put 2 doors in here, and we also have a door on the side. Well, it's on the other side of this roof axis and you can't see it. We're going to put one right in the middle here. So let's go ahead and do that. Select the roof axis, and I'm going to ring select these edges here. Use edge cut with 2 subdivisions, and I'll just scale these edges down, and I'll also scale these ones down. Select both of these edge loops, and I'll make this a size of 80. So it's a door that is a little bit smaller than the ones we used for the floor modules. And I'll also make a loop cut here and select these edges and one at the bottom, and I'm going to scale these, and let's give this a height of 200 units. And we also have 2 doors on this side, and we can see these in the front view. And this time I'm going to use the line cut tool, just switch off visible only, and I'll make 2 cuts here. Select these edges and change the size to 80 on the x-axis. I'll just reset the axis first, and so now I've scaled these edges down to the size of the door, and maybe let's move these over a little bit, and we need to do this one more time over here. So I'll just create 2 more cuts, select these edges and scale them to 80 on the x-axis, and maybe let's move these over a little bit just to put them in between these 2 bars. Doesn't have to be super exact. So now we can select the doors, and I'll extrude these in -10. And I'm going to delete the polygons here at the bottom. And then I'll select these 2 polygons up here, and I'll quick extrude these up, maybe 20 centimeters or so. And there we go, that is our finished roof axis. Next we're going to create the railing for the roof. And my main concern with the railing on the roof was that I wanted an even distribution of these balusters. And no matter what I tried, I just couldn't get a really even distribution. So I ended up taking a similar approach to the one I used for the roof axis. And we're going to start by creating a spline that we can use to distribute our balusters. And the way I'm going to start this is, again, with a plane, and I'm going to move it up and snap it to the roof here. And I'll use 1x1 segments, and I want the balusters to be spaced apart 60 units. So we'll make this 60 by 60. And then what I'll do is I'll move it over, and I'll just switch off the reference image for now, and place it about here, with a little distance to the edge of the roof. And then I'm going to put this in a cloner, and I'll clone it along the x-axis, 60 units, like this. And then all we need to do is increase the number of clones. And I'll adjust the position a little bit, trying to get an even distance from both of these edges here. We can still adjust that once we've made this editable. And I'm going to put this cloner in a connect object, and I'll make this editable. And I'll reset the object axis to the center of this object, and I'll just move it back on the z-axis to here. And now we can just move this to 0 on the x-axis to center it on that roof here. And I think the distance is looking good. I'll put this in another cloner. And this time I'm going to clone along the z-axis. -60, and let's just increase the number of clones until we get something like this. And I'll put this one in a connect object and make this editable. I don't think we need to optimize it, but I just did it anyway, just to see what happens, but nothing got optimized. So the connect objects usually welds all the points and optimizes the object for you. I'll just get rid of this tag. So now we've got this even grid of squares here. And what I'll do next is I'll remove some of these because we have these cutouts here. So let's go to point mode, and I'll just get rid of these points here. And it depends on how close you want to get to the edge of the building. We could also remove these points here if we wanted to. And we're also pretty close to the edge here. So maybe let's go ahead and remove these points as well. Although, come to think of it, maybe I'll just get rid of these ones. And the distance to the edge is the only compromise that I had to make for this roof railing here. Let's see. Let's get rid of these points here. Next, what I'll do is I'll go to model mode and I'll center the axis on this object, and then I'm going to scale it a little bit to maybe about here. And then what we can do is use the loop selection tool and select the outline of this object. And I'm going to use mesh commands edge to spline to create the spline that I need. And I'm going to hide this for now. I don't think we'll need this again, but I'll keep it just in case. And this one I'm going to call roof baluster path. And for the roof I'll be using two different balusters. The ones on the corner are a little bit bigger regarding their width and depth than the other balusters. So we're going to need a second spline. I'll make a copy and rename this to baluster big path. So that means that this one is the path for the smaller baluster, and I'll hide the small one for now, or rather the spline for the small balusters. And let's go to the top view, select this spline here and go to point mode, and we only need the big balusters on the corner, so that means we can get rid of all the points in between the corner points. And it looks like I'm deleting everything when I delete these points. I'm not sure why that is. Let's switch this to solo mode, because I should actually be able to remove these points. So maybe I just selected and deleted some that I shouldn't have selected and deleted. In any case, we can get rid of all of the points in between the corners and then clone the bigger baluster to the vertices of this spline. So we've got our two splines. We're going to need a third one for the railing and the handrail, so the bottom and the top of the railing. And for those I'm going to use this spline here and call it railing path. And as far as the railing goes, I will make this the same dimensions that I used for the balconies. So the bottom and top will be 5 units high and 10 units deep. The small balusters will be 5 by 5 for the width and depth and 110 for the height, and the bigger baluster for the corners will be 8 by 8 by 110 centimeters. So we need a couple of balusters, and we can reuse the one that we already created for the balcony, for the small balconies. So let's grab that small baluster, copy it and paste it, and this is our roof baluster small, and we'll create another one and call this baluster big. And I'm going to make both of these children of one of the splines and then use reset PSR. Let's switch off solo mode, and I'm going to hide a few objects here so we can actually see what we're doing. So let's hide the roof access and its components. I'm also going to hide the roof itself. I'll just drag these out again. Let's delete this connect object. We're not going to need this anymore. So there we go. We have our baluster small and the baluster big. Right now these are both it's the same. Let's change the big one. I'll just select all the points and set these to 8 by 8. And we can put this in a cloner object, and we're going to clone onto an object, and it's going to be the baluster path for the big baluster, this one. And I'm going to clone to the vertices of that spline. And I'm also going to clone the small baluster. again I'm going to clone to an object, and this time the object is this one, and again I'm cloning to the vertices. And I accidentally moved the spline into the cloner. I need to get this out of there. Because we have a bottom railing and the handrail up there, we need to move these balusters up a little bit. And in order to do that, we need to select the splines for the balusters, go to model mode, and we need to move these up 5 units. And it seems I copied the balusters twice. We can get rid of these. And now we need the railing, and I'm going to put that in a sweep object, and I'll add a rectangle, and this needs to have a width of 10 and a height of 5. And I'll just select the splines, and I'll try and, well, let's undo that. We moved these up 5 centimeters and it didn't work. I'm going to move these back down, and it looks like we only need to move these up 2.5. Okay, so that's better. And this sweep object is the railing. So this is the railing profile, and this is the railing bottom, and I'll make a copy of that, and I'll move this up, and then move it down -5 to make it sit on top of the balusters. And there we go, that is our railing for the roof. So I'm going to switch everything back on now. And I'm going to unfold everything. It seems we have some hidden objects here that we need to make visible again. And the last thing I'm going to change is the color of these clones. And there we go, that is our finished high-rise building. I'll just switch that back to row shading with lines. Finally, I'm going to organize the scene a little bit better. First of all, I'm going to create a null object for the roof. And we're going to put all the roof objects in there. So that's the roof access bar, everything up here basically, and that goes inside this null object, and these are the roof components. Everything else already is organized. I'm just going to add one more null object right at the bottom And this is our high-rise building. And I'll put all the other objects in there. So this is the end of this tutorial. I have probably mentioned in one of the videos that I wanted to convert this building into real geometry, but we're not going to do this in this video. If you want to, you can keep all the parametric objects. And also, I didn't want to make you sit through another 40 to 60 minutes watching me creating selection tags and converting and combining objects. However, I've prepared a file where I actually have converted the building components, and I would like to show you that file. And what I've done is I've created two different versions. One is a version where I've connected all of the object into a single piece of geometry. And the other one is a version where I've grouped the individual objects depending on what they are and where they belong to. So these are a couple of null objects, and here we have a null object with the roof components and the roof axis, the balusters, railing, and one of these is the top railing and one of these is the bottom railing. These are still separate objects, but objects like the balusters are a single piece of geometry. And if you also want to convert your objects, you'll need to make sure that you create selection tags before you make things editable and combine individual components. And that's very important because you need to be able to make selections and texture different objects or different components. And if you don't create selection tags and just convert everything into a single object, it's going to be very difficult to make selections and apply textures. And if I go to polygon mode here and double click on one of these tags, you can see the selections that I've made. And I've also named each of these tags so I know what it is. So these are the roof components, for example, the balusters, and these are the ledges of the floors, the walls, and these are the doors. And for the lamps, I've created a couple of selection tags. So one is the glass, another one is for the fixture, and the third one is for the body of the lamp. And converting this object into a single piece of geometry has some advantages. One of them is that the object isn't as heavy as the unconverted high-rise building. Another one is that you don't have that many objects, and that just makes it a little bit easier to access things. And I still have a lot of selection tags, but overall this is a much more manageable piece of geometry or a much more manageable object. And my final version of this high-rise building has 25,223 polygons, and if I select the quads, you can see it's all four-sided polygons. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you again soon.